Subscribe to The Honest Critique for current affairs, movie, book, and product reviews. Also, make sure you press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the video series are solely those of the individuals and do not necessarily represent those of The Honest Critique and its employees. The following video contains strong language which may be offensive to some viewers. Viewer discretion advised.
Today we have among us Lieutenant General Saib Atta Hasneen. He is a former commander of the Srinagar-based 15 Corps and now the Chancellor for the Central University of Kashmir and member of the National Disaster Management Authority. Sir has also had a diverse military situation through services in Operation Pawan, Operation Meghdoot, Eastern Ladakh, Punjab Insurgency Line of Control, and the Northeast. Thank you so much, sir, for taking your time, and thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, General, for being on board with us. And indeed, thank you for your service. Yeah. So Pakistan has been again in the news, but not for very right or not for very wrong reasons this time. Of course, the first time when Pakistan came to news these days was because of the FATF grey listing and again grey listing of Pakistan. And secondly, that the new agreement upon the 2003 ceasefire, which the both DGMOs of India and Pakistan jointly declared a joint statement. So coming on that 2003 ceasefire agreement, sir, can you give us a brief introduction about the 2003 ceasefire that happened between both the countries at the DGMO level?
Okay, thank you very much. Firstly, a pleasure to be with you on your show. As to your question, cutting it very brisk, 2003 actually saying is a misnomer. The 2003 is an agreement, is a ceasefire agreement. The ceasefire agreement is of 1972. Shimla Agreement is from there that it takes off. It was always in existence. There were breaches of ceasefire. In 2003, on the 26th of November, the ceasefire was reiterated by the two DGMOs. There was nothing in writing. It was just a joint resolution, a joint statement which was put out, reiterating, and I keep repeating this word reiterating. It is the reiteration of the existing ceasefire. And therefore, what has happened this time is the reiteration of 2003. So it actually goes back to 1972. The ceasefire agreement is of 1972. And this is the reiteration which has happened probably the third time, right? What has happened is definitely that both sides have agreed that enough is enough in terms of exchange of fire, which is escalating to higher levels. The breaches of the ceasefire or ceasefire violations after 2011-12 were not of a very serious nature. There was no exchange of shelling. There was no mortar firing and things like that. That started a little later, but in the last 2, 3, or 4 years, it has reached very, very high levels. And the number of violations is alarmingly high. The number of civilian casualties and now also a large number of service casualties has also been extremely high on both sides. And therefore, probably if at all, there is a need for the situation in the subcontinent to change. If the situation in Jammu and Kashmir has to change, the start point is some start of stability at the line of control. Because the line of control is the place where the messaging, the strategic messaging to the international community is done by Pakistan. It is Pakistan's wish to try and convince the international community that there is a dangerous play going on in Jammu and Kashmir between two nuclear-named armed neighbors, and that this situation can spiral out of control and create a major problem for the rest of the world.
Yeah. So, sir, for our audience who does not understand the basis of why does a state actor, not a non-state actor, will engage in ceasefire violation when the agreement is between two mutual states?
See, this agreement was, as I told you, between India and Pakistan, dating back to 1972 as a part of the Shimla Agreement, by which bilateralism was introduced. The principle and concept of third-party intervention was done away with. But uh, all ceasefires, anywhere, whichever any part of the world, always has certain breaches taking place from time to time. And you have some kind of a mechanism by which you investigate who is responsible for it, how has it happened, etc. In our case, this is a mutual understanding. As you should be aware, and your audience should be aware, there is no third party here. The UN is not a party to this, right? Pakistan likes to bring in the United Nations Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan, which is called UNMOGIP, into play also here. From the Indian side, we do not recognize UNMOGIP at all under the Shimla Agreement. We tolerate the presence of UNMOGIP on our side, and Pakistan, of course, keeps them on their side and continues to play to them. They continues to empower them to carry out investigations of so-called violations, etc. So it's not two sides that are involved in this. The issue of violations is that taken place to such a great extent that if at all peace had to be brought about in the subcontinent, and with the changing strategic environment of the world, with the coming of the Biden administration, the Chinese taking a slight backstep on their aggressiveness, probably some kind of a interplay with Pakistan to also take a back step. All this could only be possible now in the Indian subcontinent by ensuring that there is peace and stability on the line of control, and that both the sides are, as you very correctly say, they are both state actors, but state actors themselves also have certain compulsions to play out these violations from time to time. Pakistan plays out these violations, as I told you, for a particular set of reasons. Number one, earlier years, the infiltration of terrorists into Kashmir under the cover of this fire, of the breaches of the ceasefire. Number two, the very important aspect of stopping construction of defenses or improvement of defenses anywhere along the line of control. Third, in the case of certain people walking across the line of control or animals crossing, etc. Fourth, very, very important aspect is the aspect of moral domination. The whole issue of moral, the thing of ascendancy. Which is the better army? We are the better trained army. They are the better trained army. Who is the thing? So this moral ascendancy business comes into it in many times. And from 2015 onwards, in the Jammu IB sector, international border sector, a particular strategy followed by Pakistan to carry out breaches of ceasefire, to carry out violations, to target the Hindu population there, to try and bring about a wedge, try and communalize the whole issue in the Jammu region. General Bajwa came on record to say that there should be peace overtures, there should be more stability between India and Pakistan. That was the first indication we got that Pakistan is changing its colors. At that time, everyone thought that this was only for the sake of the FATF. But obviously, the FATF decision has gone past. Pakistan has been placed on the grey list again. Now let's see how long it holds. If it holds for a fairly long time, we will know that there is a seriousness to it, and there is a larger picture which is emerging in the subcontinent.
Is a ceasefire agreement that has been drafted by Pakistan proves that it's not that they need to engage in a direct one-to-one exchange when they can have proxies being deployed to various parts.
Right? They are not non-state actors. All of them are sponsored by the Pakistani state. So they are state actors.
Yeah.
That's a very start point that we must always be very clear about. The Indian stance is very clear. Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Al-Badr, any of these groups which are coming across are very much under the support of the ISI, of the Pakistan Army. Can they infiltrate into our territory if the Pakistan Army doesn't support them? They can stop them anywhere on the other side in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, but it doesn't happen. There are 42 training camps on the other side, right? Have they wound up those training camps? No, they have not, right? So these are very much state actors who are there. Secondly, there is Pakistan had a high capability to manipulate and calibrate the situation in Jammu and Kashmir for a very, very long time. Ever since 2017, particularly after the National Investigative Agency has gone into countering the various networks, the financial networks, the media networks, the overground worker networks, ever since then, and in 2019, the decision of the 5th of August to abrogate Article 370, since then, Pakistan's capability to manipulate and calibrate the situation in Jammu and Kashmir has greatly been marginalized. One of the major reasons for this offer of ceasefire, which has come from Pakistan, although Pakistan claims it's probably come from India, is the fact that Pakistan is not in a position to do very much in Jammu and Kashmir at the moment. Their economy is suffering hugely. We are aware of. Just compare the foreign exchange reserves of the two countries. $587 billion is what India's foreign exchange reserves are today, with Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves pegged at about $18 to $20 billion. So that's the difference. And Pakistan is hamstrung financially. If they have to go for fresh loans from the World Bank, IMF, anyone, the first thing will be is the FATF, the strictures, the FATF certification, which will be required. The Americans they'll be looking at the Americans for certification and things like that. For that, you have to create a conducive environment. To create that conducive environment, which may be very, very temporary, they would like to offer a ceasefire. Right? We are a larger country, although we have suffered tremendously. But when there's an offer of a ceasefire, India has no hesitation in accepting it, because a ceasefire only facilitates the next steps. We are not going into a peace process by this. We are only going into a ceasefire arrangement. The peace process is a much later thing and a much larger thing, in which unless Pakistan clearly states that it will withdraw all support to the so-called state actors, the terrorists who are being supported by Pakistan, till then India will have anything to do with negotiations with Pakistan in a peace process. Yeah.
So, sir, what prompted? You have mentioned a little bit in the initial stages of the interview, but to recollect that and to put it once more, what prompted Pakistan to go for this agreement right now? Is it the disengagement that's taking place, or is it because of the pressure put from Biden administration at this moment?
Or is it the FATF regulations?
Yeah. Let's start with the backdrop, and I've already explained it to some extent. The Ladakh situation has started improving with the disengagement agreement, and it's around that time that General Bajwa also made his statement. So obviously, I think everything goes back to the Biden administration's coming into power, the swearing-in ceremony, and maybe even before that, the fact that the Biden administration was in the process of taking over, that was sending out more positive signals from the time of Trump administration. Definitely the Biden administration's coming has sent out more positive signals to the world, to China perhaps also. China was attempting to exploit the period of the pandemic when the world economy is down, when China's own economy has not been so badly affected as the rest of the world, and it was trying to pressurize the rest of the world through wolf warrior diplomacy and all kinds of things like that. Suddenly, they probably decided that it would be advantageous. The Chinese felt it would be advantageous to give peace a chance, to start looking at the new world order, which will probably re-emerge after the pandemic, and what hand will they have in the formation of that new world order. They didn't want to be on the negative side as such. Now, that effect has obviously traveled to the Pakistani side. The Pakistanis didn't want to lose out either. They are a very important player in Afghanistan. If there has to be peace in Afghanistan, it can't be without the Pakistanis. But the Pakistanis do not have the capability to handle simultaneously Afghanistan and Jammu and Kashmir. To be very proactive in Jammu and Kashmir, they can't handle both sides. So it's best to stabilize this side. Earlier, the Pakistanis were always looking for putting Kashmir on a back burner. carrying out small calibrated activities there, but that capability has run out today. So for Pakistan, the best thing is to seek some element of peace in Jammu and Kashmir and probably come back to tackle the situation once they are in a position to do so, once Afghanistan is in a state which is under greater control as far as Pakistan is concerned. So these were some of the issues besides the FATF, of course. The FATF, it was important to project to the FATF. It's not just the FATF meeting this time. It is the FATF process which is very important. Pakistan has still not carried out 3 of the actions which were required by the FATF to execute. And besides that, the creation of a more conducive environment with India would send home some positive signals to the FATF itself this time or in the future. So these are some of the reasons why Pakistan probably has chosen to go for this, but by no means is this a final thing. It is just the beginning of a new strategic situation which is being created.
Okay, sir. So you pinpointed a couple of reasons what might have prompted Pakistan to pursue this joint declaration. Coming to that joint declaration that both the DGMOs have signed, sir, there is one very interesting clause in that which says address each other core issues. So according to my perception, according to any Indian perception, the core issue with Pakistan is the infiltration, the actions of BAT, the Border Action Team, and terrorism, to be very honest. And the core issue from the Pakistani perspective is Kashmir. So if we are trying to collectively address each other's core issue, don't you think that will make a major impact on the ceasefire, the recent development on the ceasefire and the way forward?
Let me first correct you on one issue. There has been no
Yes.
signing of this. There has been no signing involved in this agreement. It's an unwritten agreement. Like 2003, it's the same way. It's a reiteration and no written work in this at all.
Just an announcement.
That's an announcement, joint announcement. Secondly, you're very right. This issue is very important that both have agreed to address each other's core concerns. Our core concerns are infiltration. Our core concerns are the whole aspect of proxy war, terrorism, etc. Their concerns are, well, they don't say it, but their concerns internationally, which they take home to everyone, is the human rights violations in the valley and things like that. That is what they talk about so much, and the whole issue of Kashmir itself being a part of Jammu or being a part of Pakistan. So now it's very easy to state these things. When you are coming into these kind of agreements, it's very good to state it. It creates a conducive environment to take the whole issue forward. How much can you stick to it? Pakistan has promised this any number of times. You remember the 13th of January speech of Pervez Musharraf in 2002, after the attack on Parliament and the mobilization of the Indian Army, which had begun in Operation Parakaram. 13th of January 2002, Pervez Musharraf promised in a public speech, he promised that Pakistan would never allow its space to be used by terrorists. What happened from 2002 till 2021? 19 years, Pakistan has been only using that space, right? So these promises are made for all kinds of purposes. As long as we can ensure that the environment on the LOC is, when I say conducive, it means essentially that once in a while a violation here and there is okay. I've seen those violations taking place and those are controllable. It is the large-scale thing, the continuing things, the proactive ones, and then going upgrading your state of violations. That is going in with artillery, going in with direct firing weapons, going in with missiles. That is what causes all the problem. And then the casualties have been increasing by the day. I remember I've lived in Kashmir in many earlier years when the violations used to take place before 2003. We never had these type of casualties being suffered. But today, obviously, better guns, better sniper weapons, etc. All kinds of things have been brought in. Missiles have been brought in. So casualty rates have gone up hugely. So to that extent, I would say that as long as there is an absence of violence, there are no attempted bad actions. If there are attempted bad actions, the Indian Army will always respond. They will do something which may be unpublicized, right? So if all this is not there, it helps in the other domains, which is in the diplomatic, the political, probably the people-to-people domain. Now, one of the things everyone looks forward to in India, normally in Pakistan also, is the exchange of cricket matches, to have cricket matches, right? We would love to see Pakistan cricket team here. We would like to see the Indian cricket team playing with Pakistan. But that state can only be reached once you are certain that for 6 months, 1 year, the ceasefire has held. There is no killing of each other on the line of control. Infiltration is under control. A little bit here and there may take place, but an environment is being created. So what I've always been holding is that to make a ceasefire agreement work, you have to build into it or around it. You have to build in the political aspect. You have to build in the economic and social aspect. And you got to build in the people-to-people aspect. If this starts developing and have you got a simultaneous back channel taking place, probably in the next 3-4 years, you'll find the situation improving to a much greater extent, like it happened between 2004 and 2008. At that time also, the effect of Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and his influence on the personality of Musharraf made a huge change. And that ceasefire agreement was substantiated with a back channel diplomacy which was going on throughout. And that helped immensely.
That's very fine, sir. And I'm glad you brought Mr. Vajpayee's visit, Mr. Vajpayee's dialogue, as well as President Musharraf's. Sir, back in 2002, Brajesh Mishra, one of the topmost national security advisor, one of the topmost bureaucrat of India back then, was known to be very close associated of Prime Minister Vajpayee ji. He said that for coercive diplomacy to work, the threat has to be so real that even we would start believing it. Meaning, having said that, in 2002, we mobilized our forces across the LOC. We made an environment close to that would have initiated a war with any kind of local provocation, if I'm not wrong, sir. So from that point till 2008, there was the peace, if I could say, still sustained. As you said, the personality was such of Vajpayee ji that, you know, the initiatives, the declarations, whatever, sustained. So it was after 2008, the terror attack, I believe, which changed the mood in both the countries, sir. So what has been the situation since then till now?
You are referring to the situation since 26/11, since the attack in Mumbai.
Yeah.
You see, since the attack in Mumbai, which upset the entire apple cart, as I have been writing, it upset the entire stability of the ceasefire. Despite that, the ceasefire continued, let me tell you. I was there on 26/11 in Kashmir, and I know that on the line of control, there were no exchanges of fire or anything like that which took place. And for the next 2 to 3 years, it didn't happen. There were exchange of fire going on in the Mendhar and the Krishna Ghati areas south of the Pir Panjal, but in Kashmir, along the line of control, there was no exchange of fire, which was very, very surprising. But the peace process, a serious peace process, which was being attempted in the period of 2004 to 2008, that got upset. And then you had some vague attempts like Sharm el-Sheikh, where the two sides met, which was catastrophic. I mean, the Indian side really didn't perform in any great way, did not come home with any great takeaways from there. And subsequently, you found from 2013-14 onwards, the Pakistan propensity to do bad actions, violations of ceasefire kept on increasing by the year. By 2014, when Mr. Modi came to power, the situation was still not too bad, although there had been 2-3 bad actions which had taken place. Retaliation may have happened for that. I can't really recall. But in 2014, Mr. Modi made a gesture by calling Nawaz Sharif for the ceremony, 26th of May 2014. Yes. For 1.5 years, 1 year and 3-4 months, Mr. Modi didn't pursue anything very major on the Pakistan front or on the Kashmir issue. It is in UFA, August of 2015, that the first step was taken with UFA, the meeting of Mr. Modi with Nawaz Sharif. And then the meeting of the two national security advisors in Bangkok. And then the visit of Mrs. Sushma Swaraj to Islamabad as a part of the Heart of Asia conference. These three events were major things. And the fourth, which was the ultimate event, was the dash made by Prime Minister Modi to Lahore from Kabul on his way back to Delhi, which took everyone by surprise. Now, Mr. Modi is a transformational leader. He's built in a different way. He thinks differently in terms of how to do execution of decisions. In his wisdom, he felt that a transformational way was just going and taking this problem by the scruff of his neck. And the best way would be to land up in Lahore and be there with the adversary and let's talk peace. I would love to do a thing like that. But we got hit back in 7 days by the attack in Pathankot. Right? And 2016 was a bad year. It's then led to, later on, led to Burhan Wani, the killing of Burhan Wani, the Uri incident, the surgical strikes. One after the other, things started happening. And it ended up with 2019 Pulwama, Balakot, and the 5th of August abrogation of Article 370. In the middle, once there was an agreement, reiteration of the ceasefire between the DGMOs once again. I'm forgetting the year, I think it was 2017, when once again there was an agreement, a reiteration of the agreement. But that broke down. Well, it broke down very, very, very quickly. In a matter of a couple of weeks, it broke down completely. Right? And since 2019, after the abrogation of 370, when Pakistan, felt absolutely peeved by this entire thing, they withdrew their ambassador and things like that. Obviously, things have only gone southwards, downhill. And the ceasefire has only been, it's hardly been there as a ceasefire. It's been more in the form of violations which have existed. So this is the first major step after 1.5 years. Does it spell hope? I'm not so sure at the moment, and I'm not so confident at the moment. The inputs don't appear yet to be very, very positive. But yet, I think it's a good decision by both the countries. It's a very good decision by both the leaderships. And if peace can be given a chance, why not?
Okay, sir. So you rightly mentioned about Modi's surprise visit to Lahore or inviting Nawaz Sharif to swearing-in ceremony. But then, as you mentioned, the different setbacks that happened, whether it's Uri, Pathankot, or Nagrota. Looking at those incidents and looking at this point of time, where we still see the proliferation of militants across the border, and Pakistan has not met the basic conditions for us to go and sit at the table, whether it's handing over the 2008 the perpetrators of the 2008 Mumbai massacre, or stopping this proliferation of militants across the border, or in fact handing over Dawood Ibrahim. Should we be talking to Pakistan because they have not met the basic criteria to be sitting on the table?
A single word, no. We should not be talking. We should not be talking. That's the principle we have followed for the last couple of years. No talking. It's not only the BJP government. It was even before that the UPA government, which said very clearly, both the governments, I think there's total consensus on this. No necessity to talk to Pakistan until the evidence is very clear that Pakistan is not involved anymore in the proxy war, in the export of terror into India. The day Pakistan promises that and acts upon it, India will be the first country to come on board, and together they can start looking at issues afresh. It may take a couple of years. Peace doesn't come in a matter of weeks. It may take many, many years. But ways will be found by which we can put our differences aside and continue to work together. That was exactly what was the effect of 2003 ceasefire. We started putting our differences aside. We started looking at the 4-point formula. Okay, that formula is dead today, but we started looking at how to make the LOC irrelevant, as Mr. Manmohan Singh had said at that time. Now, these are some of the principles which start coming up the moment you have a workable ceasefire. I'm sure if this ceasefire also works for some time, you will find an environment of positivity may emerge from it. But just remember that Pakistan's awkward demands, like restoration of Article 370, that is laughable. These are issues which you can't talk about because that's a decision by the Parliament of India. It's not just the Government of India which has done something. It is the legislature, it's the parliamentary resolution which has parliamentary act by which Article 370 has been rescinded.
I'm glad you brought the issue of Article 370 because for any Pakistan watcher, the dawn starts by reading the dawn, be it in India or be it in Pakistan. I'm sure about
I
that.
do.
I'm
Every
sure it
morning
goes
I do
with you
that
as well.
first thing.
I know, right? So, having said that, so one feeling which is very common in Pakistan these days that they are capable enough to reverse the decision of 5th August 2019. Well, we both know the reality sitting in India that there is no possibility that can happen. And in no way Pakistan is so influential to make such a domestic change in India. Having said that, Pakistan's position on Kashmir remains unchanged. So how does this guarantee normalcy in the coming days, sir?
There is no guarantee of normalcy in coming days. I would say that it's a misnomer to think these are temporary situations which we have created through our hard work, through our efforts of our security forces, but there's no permanence in this at all. Pakistan has not accepted anything. That is, in terms of the terrorist camps are still very much there. The infiltration is still continuing. The efforts to try and bring money, to bring military wherewithal into Kashmir is still continuing. You remember in the month of November when 4 terrorists were killed in Nagrota, they had brought with them 10 AK-47s, right? A couple of pistols, many grenades. All these efforts are still continuing, right? So while all this is happening, I don't think there is much of a chance of peace, but we as a nation are hopeful. We are happy to see things happening. We can't be accused of not, adhering to the requirements. Each time that Pakistan has come to us with it, we have been very much responding to it and positively responding to it, right? So now, if there is a sustenance of this kind of a peaceful environment, only then, and there are substantial kind of initiatives which come from either side, India or Pakistan. Mostly initiatives have actually come. Okay, let's call it they've come in a balanced way. Mr. Vajpayee played out a number of initiatives. The Agra summit, before that, the Lahore Yatra. Mr. Musharraf, President Musharraf himself, the ceasefire of 2003. Many times is ascribed to President Musharraf, although it was actually a mutual agreement between both the countries. But the fact that President Musharraf, being a military man, agreed to engage with India in a peace process itself was a marvel, because he was not supported by any of his core commanders, which is what I'm told with my interaction with some of the Pakistani senior officers. I'm told it was never supported by anyone among the serving community in Pakistan.
Very rightly, you pointed that it was very unexpected and very incredible of Pervez Musharraf to have started this peace initiative and coming up with things like 4-point formula with Kashmir during Vajpayee's time. But sir, what is the feeling right now is within Pakistan and other communities as well, that General Bajwa has pulled off a General Musharraf moment, that he is being seen as the dove of peace, the peaceful dove who is carrying the message, who is making welcoming noises, while India should be accepted to reciprocate. So what is your personal assessment of General Bajwa in that case?
Very good question. Very good question. My personal assessment of General Bajwa when he came to power as the army chief was rather positive. His initial actions, etc., his utterances, what I heard from other senior officers of the Pakistan Army who I did meet internationally, it appeared that his thinking was positive. He's a bit of a cerebral general. He has commanded 10 Corps in Rawalpindi, looking after the Jammu and Kashmir area. So he knew the Kashmir conflict very well. He knows Indo-Pakistan relations very well, and he started with a very positive kind of a mindset that somehow went awry completely. Either he didn't have control or he didn't want to have control over the situation, over the jihadi groups, etc. One can't really say at any point of time. But today, I think we are overreading this whole situation and saying that this is a Musharraf moment. Because in the Musharraf moment also, I have just outlined to you that Musharraf was one lonely figure supporting this. It didn't emerge at that time, but subsequently it became very clear that no one in the Pakistan army was supporting this. Not one army chief in Pakistan by himself cannot pull it off. He has to have the support of his corps commanders. Is that support there very much today? I don't think so. General Bajwa's extension itself, the 3-year extension, has caused a lot of heartburn among senior officers of the Pakistan army. A couple of batches have have lost their opportunity of becoming the army chiefs or corps commanders and things like that. So I would not give too serious a consideration to this aspect of the Musharraf movement.
So wasn't the same case with General Rahil Sharif as well?
Rahil Sharif, from our side, Rahil Sharif was always considered a rogue because you see, Rahil Sharif had an axe to grind with India. He had lost an elder brother in the war with India in 71, I think. And he was a decorated soldier, a kind of a hero in Pakistan, and he rose up to be the army chief. Obviously, his demeanor was very, very negative towards India. And he would be the last person who would actually step forward to take an initiative to bring about peace between India and Pakistan at that stage. I don't think it was anything in any way in which he took any positive kind of an initiative. That is why the coming of General Bajwa did create a couple of days. It did create a positive environment. His press conference, if you remember, his media conference in Rawalpindi, which carried on for the better part of 3 to 4, 5 hours. In that, he spoke a lot of things about his mind. Spoke his mind about a lot of things which were simply actually out of the box at that particular time. But he couldn't really execute them and carry them forward.
Right. So right now, the situation in Kashmir, and are we preparing for a hot summer out there? Even though this agreement comes to place, are we preparing for a hot summer?
Good question. I'm an ex-Joshi 15 Corps, and I can assure you, if 15 Corps is not prepared for a hot summer every year, then there's something wrong with the command system of 15 Corps. Whether there is utter peace on the line of control, or there's utter turbulence everywhere, there's utter peace everywhere in Jammu and Kashmir, I would still prepare for a hot summer because I know that the situation can change overnight. You saw what happened with Burhan Wani's killing.
Yep,
right?
yep.
On the 8th of July evening, he was killed. I remember I was traveling in a train and I got the message and I was surprised by the event and I straight away said, what is happening? They said, a lot of things are happening on the roads. There's a curfew here, this, that. I could anticipate immediately that there is going to be a major change in the situation in Kashmir at that particular time. And it did happen exactly like that. So one event, Kashmir is a place where a sub-tactical event, which means at the lowest level, a sub-tactical event can become strategic in 5 minutes. That's the way I always explain to people. A sub-tactical event at the line of control or somewhere here and there can become strategic in 5 minutes. So you better be prepared for a hot summer always.
For all the people in the media and the public who are cheering this as kind of a diplomatic or any kind of a victory, and we're going to have a people-to-people contact, more people-to-people contact, more cricket matches coming in, would you have a message that it's again a dove versus hawk game? It's not a peace.
I'm not so negative. First of all, when it comes to these kind of issues, I always think that any little step, any baby steps which have been taken towards peace are always good. They're always positive. They are very welcome. It's a question of taking it forward beyond. I'm not very hopeful that we are in the kind of environment that we have existed in the last couple of years, that we are in a position to take this forward in a positive way, unless Pakistan itself wants to do it. You see, I've written a lot about this in the media, where I mentioned, and a lot of people have criticized me for it, to say that why is it only upon Pakistan to take this forward? I said, where has India taken a back step? India has never taken a back step. It is Pakistan which has, if we are at the receiving end of the proxy war all these years, it is our people who are dying inside out here, right? So terrorists are coming from the other side. This war has gone on for the better part of 30 years, the proxy war. So the steps have to be taken on the other side to stop all this. The moment they do that, we can do business together. We can do many things together.
Sir, adding to that, as Siddhant was mentioning that over here, Vajpayee had a moment of being the Pervez Musharraf. Can Mr. Modi also does have a chance to become the Vajpayee by taking the next step?
I would say yes, as I am always hopeful. I would say yes again to it. But this situation at this time is much, much worse than what it was perhaps in Vajpayee's time. Yes, Vajpayee's time had its problems. You had Kargil, you had the parliament attack, and subsequently the situation in Jammu and Kashmir was never very conducive in the year 2001-3 at that particular time. Today, violence is completely down. Mr. Modi is known for his transformative approach. Let me put it very clearly, he's known for his transformative approach. So the expectation is that probably, yes, if the situation moves in the direction which is conducive to peace, this awkwardness about Ladakh, etc., is behind us. It is now becoming more bilateral between India and Pakistan alone. I think definitely you can have some expectations that the current political leadership will take this forward. Why not? After all, the political leaderships are not here for making war. All of them are essentially there to create peace and bring about development in the country.
Sir, having said that, what is the situation that is also being calculated these days, that the diplomatic relations will be restored, trade will be restored, and eventually in the coming days, the Delhi's diplomatic initiative by lobbying with other countries and isolating Pakistan in the SAARC summit will actually come to a halt, while New Delhi will allow the SAARC summit to happen in Islamabad. So these are the current noises that are being created in the media and in the community. So what is your take on that, sir?
Absolutely. This is a very good point that you've touched upon. Starting with the gesture from India to permit the Prime Minister Imran Khan to overfly Indian territory to go to Sri Lanka. Excellent gesture. Very, very good gesture. Equally, I would always want Pakistan to ensure they facilitate the overflights of our Prime Minister whenever he is visiting towards the West anytime. That will be great, absolutely. But when it comes to SAARC, SAARC can become the vehicle of change. There is no doubt about it. SAARC has not been given its due, it's not been given its sufficient importance. It has suffered primarily because of the lack of movement and energy in India-Pakistan relations. This year, the summit is supposed to be postponed. The summit is supposed to be again in Pakistan. If we can let that happen, after all, Mr. Modi facilitated the visit by Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, and if nothing had happened after that, if Mr. Modi's visit to Lahore had not been followed up by Pathankot, I would have probably foreseen that in 2016, probably Mr. Modi himself may have visited Islamabad officially, formally and officially, which would have been a game changer completely. But that didn't happen because of what happened in Pathankot. Now, one thing that we have to keep in mind, which we have not touched upon in this discussion so far, that Pakistan is not necessarily run only by the army chief. It's not run only by the prime minister. It is also run by the deep state. And we all know what the deep state is. I mean, the kind of people
the ISI.
No, not alone the ISI. It is the ISI, it is the army itself, it is the veteran army community, it is a number of bureaucrats, there are lots of members of the judiciary, and there are ideologues, there are people from the clergy. All this is a conglomeration which is there together, which is called the deep state, which allows the situation which it produces between India and Pakistan allows it to feather its own nest. That's the way the Pakistan army remains high in the pecking order. They don't want a dilution of all this. So that is the kind of threat that we are looking at. We are not expecting anything from the Indian side. We are not expecting, anything to change substantially. Otherwise, it is essentially the deep state, the threat to the deep state's existence, which is going to cause a major problem to this particular ceasefire and the peace process.
Right. So one final question, and then we can conclude the discussion, sir. Sir, General, you have spent 4 decades, right, from the rank of second lieutenant to the ranks of a three-star general officer and command. And you were the commander of 15 Corps. So you know Kashmir very well. You have been there now as well, post-retirement. Sir, what is your personal assessment of Kashmir, the situation in Kashmir? How all these recent developments that have happened across the LAC or the LOC or the bifurcation of Jammu and Kashmir state into union territories. So, what is your personal take on it? How do you see the future of Kashmir in the coming next days or in the coming
That's
few
a
years?
million-dollar question, Siddharth, and that question can take us the next 2 hours to answer. But very, in a very perfunctory way, I'll just summarize it and say, yes, the abrogation of Article 370 has been a game changer. If nothing else, psychologically, it has sent home a clear message that Azadi or Pakistan is not an option. Not an option. We will work together. Jammu and Kashmir and the rest of India will work together. Jammu and Kashmir, the two segments, will work together. We will have a political process. We will empower the people. We will ensure that we keep our borders secure. We will prevent external interference in the lives of our people there. All this but it's a long-term thing. It can't happen overnight. Everyone is expecting and thinking that because violence has been reduced, that normalcy has come. That is not true. I want to tell you, as a military man, an understanding of these situations, the absence of violence is not a normalcy, right? It's a situation in the making. It's a work in progress. So whatever is happening in Jammu and Kashmir today is on the positive, is building up on the positive side. If you heard the Home Minister's speech in Parliament and took note of this development act, that speech can be put out to the people of Kashmir and spread out everywhere. People should know what is happening. The kind of facilities which are coming up in Kashmir today. You just saw the Lieutenant Governor of Kashmir interacting with people from Bollywood. Of all things, why? Because we want to restore tourism. We want to restore film tourism once again in Kashmir. We want to bring about the tourism, winter tourism in Gulmarg all over again. All these things are happening, right? But people are impatient. They think that all this is going to happen overnight. It can't. People are questioning me that Article 317 abrogation promised that there will be huge investments in Kashmir. Yes, those investments will take place one day once the environment is completely conducive to investment. At the moment, it is not. So these things are what we have to understand from a security angle, from a strategic angle. We have to keep educating people through the medium of our talks, the manner in which we are speaking to each other at the moment. Right.
So the point is, as you're mentioning about the absence of violence is not peace, and it's not normalcy. But do you think the absence of a political process for so long also gives certain actors a lot of space as well to grow?
Okay,
And
let's put it this way.
okay.
You remember 1989 when proxy war conflict initiation started? For 7 years, there was no political process. From 1989 to 1996. I'm not saying that we have to repeat everything which happened in the past. If I have to be asked to justify this, I will say, you've had the Panchayat elections in 2019, December, very successful, 78, 75% turnout, which happened. You've had the DDC elections, right? The District Development Council elections, the first time in any part of India, the DDCs are being experimented with. That's also political process. Where the political process is not happening is in the creation of a new political community. What has happened is you still got the old political community. Well, these are things which don't happen again overnight. It will take time. It will take time. You will find that as we go along, you're going to find delimitation, which will probably take place. We will see the assembly elections taking place in a year to 2 years' time from now. If new government, whatever type of government is there, I'm sure we will respect the mandate which comes out from both Jammu and Kashmir. I'm sure we will look at the restoration of the status of Jammu and Kashmir to full state again at that particular time. All this is going to happen. You can't take premature steps on this. You can't base it on the demands of the people, because you have to keep this in sync with the security situation the way it is developing at the same time.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking your time and being on the show. Before I end it, if you have to give any message to the youth who are watching this video.
Yes, that's very, very important. The youth, which forms the huge bulge of the demographics of Jammu and Kashmir, you have to satisfy their aspirations. You can't just leave them unattended, and they can't be seeking their futures and their everything about themselves in different parts of India. You have to create the facilities within Jammu and Kashmir. We should have all the necessary education institutions, etc. there, and that's a promise which the government of India has made and is executing on the ground at the moment. I would say to the youth of Jammu and Kashmir, be with the side which is progressive. Be with the side which is economically strong. Be with the side which is legally correct. And continue to aspire for something big which will definitely come your way if you are part of this nation and continue to remain a part of this nation. I have no doubts that Jammu and Kashmir will be one of the top states of India. Its potential is huge. Every field, anything you touch, the potential is huge. It's just a matter of patience and ensuring that the hopes do not die. Umeed pe duniya jeeti hai. Remember that famous principle.
Yeah. So thank you so much, sir, once again for taking your time and being on the show. Thank you again for your service, and for your second part of the innings, thank you so much for the service that you're doing again in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you very much. Jai Hind. All the very best.